This is not my first time at Capital Factory, so thank you for having me back. This is my first time as an author, which is weird, because all my previous projects, Reddit, Hipmunk, Redpig, are startups. And one of the wonderful differences between starting a startup and writing a book is that the former is iterative, and you can always push new code if something is wrong, and the latter is not. It is done, and you are judged based on it. So hopefully a few of you got the book, hopefully a few of you enjoyed it. It's been doing well, and I wanted to make sure that I got the message of the book and the message of startups and internet entrepreneurship to as many people as possible. So I thought, last year we did an 8-stop bus tour through the heartland, showing off the Silicon Prairie. We shot a documentary called Silicon Prairie. It's freely available, download it, torrent it, whatever you want. And that was a nice beta test for a 150-stop bus tour, which we're doing right now at 75 universities all across the country and Canada, our friendly hat to the north. And I'll be at UT Austin this evening, and very excited to just sort of get this message out to as many young people as possible, as many millennials as possible. Basically give them the talk, give them the exposure that I wish I had when I were an undergrad at UVA back in 2005. And I also bring with me an alum for every one of these schools. And so I'll talk for a little bit, but then I bring up someone who is actually in that auditorium on the other side, maybe 5 or 7 years earlier, but who's now doing amazing stuff on the internet, and then interview them on stage. So it's been a lot of fun. We're only about a month in right now. And it's just been an absolute delight. I'm very happy to be back here in Austin. And I'm very happy to be here at Capital Factory because this is like an epicenter for startups and tech in the city of Austin, which is obviously no stranger to technology or tacos. But yes, amazing. It is, and I tell so many people, I live in Brooklyn. I came out for 3 years in a row, having only been to South by, and I insist to everyone, it's great, come to South by, but then come when it's not South by, because it's an even better city when all that craziness is not going on. This is, I think, my 6th trip to Austin. But anyway, I'm so pleased, very happy to be here. I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about the book. I mean, it covers Reddit, it covers some Hipmunk stuff, it covers some amazing people I've gotten to know in philanthropy, in music, in comedy, who are all using the internet just like we are, who aren't themselves building platforms, but are using the software that so many of us are making to still be awesome, be entrepreneurial online. Wow, is this a problem? Is this my voice that is the culprit?
Maybe stand a little further up.
Clearly not the technologist. Okay, there we go. Nice. All right, this was just totally my fault. Feedback. All right. So, I instead of spending a bunch of time talking about book stuff, I feel like everyone here is in some way an entrepreneur, right? Is everyone doing a startup? Just show hands. Everyone, yes, great, okay, yes, excellent. So I figured the most useful way to do this isn't just for me to tell stories from like founding Reddit or launching Hipmunk, but actually for you guys to just ask me questions, like in open office hours. I was in the first round of Y Combinator back in 2005, when that was just this crazy idea Paul Graham had. And Steve and I had just graduated from UVA. We were working on a mobile phone ordering platform called My Mobile Menu, and it was going to be great. We were going to change the world. Some people still think, I still think we could have done better with the name. The point is, we were onto something, we were going to change the world, and then we got rejected from YC. And they called us back the next morning. Remember, this is the first round, so no one knew anything about Combinator. It was just Paul Graham's little project. And they just said, listen, if you're willing to change your idea, like you guys, if you just don't like the idea, it's too early. It's 2005, remember, there were no smartphones except for the Trio, which is arguably smart. It was just, no, not so much. And so it was a matter of saying, all right, we'll kill off this old idea we've been working on for the last year and start something new. And that start something new thing happened to be Reddit. And the thing that I have to remind people, we're now a top 50 website. About 81 million people visited last month. And it started out with 2 guys who just graduated from college and had no business building a company or starting something that would one day have as much size as it does. But none of us really knew what we were doing. We still don't feel like we know what we're doing. And for anyone who ever comes before you and acts as though they do, they are probably lying, or delusional, or just not trying very hard because they've just gotten lazy and content. If you're doing anything remotely interesting or new, you are going to find yourself in situations where you don't know what you're doing. So as entrepreneurs, I think you guys all realize this firsthand. But please know that what you're seeing is a product of like 8 years of lots of mistakes, stupidity, bad decisions, lots of bad decisions, and it's still a process. So anyway, if I can help you guys avoid some of those decisions, for the startups that I invest in, I'm invested in about 80 startups at this point. I offer office hours. It's always a phone call away or a Google Hangout away, which I'm not saying ironically. I actually really like Google Hangout. I'm starting to prefer it over Skype now, which is amazing. But someone's got to use Google Plus. And if any of you have questions, if there's anything you want to talk about, getting those first 1,000 users, raising funding, trying to get in the door with major airline carriers when you're just 3 nobodies with a startup with a silly rodent name, I can happily answer any questions. Or if you just want to get specific, say, hey, I'm doing this. That's all right, please.
Hi, I'm Erica.
Hi, Erica.
There are a bunch of people here who are going through accelerator programs, and actually Capital Factory Accelerator had their demo day a few weeks ago, and then we at Techstars had our demo day yesterday. So I'd love to know, after demo day, since you've been through an accelerator, since most of us in the room are probably raising money at one point or another, what do you recommend? How do you recommend leveraging the accelerator to raise capital from investors?
Well, presumably, so the nice thing is Demo Day brings together a bunch of people who are wealthy and who are excited about startups, or at least by the end of the day, are at least like, yeah, all right, I can invest in this, So that, a lot of the great work that accelerators do is just by putting together that demo day. And for some perspective, in 05, when it was starting, and it was just the Summer Founders Program, and there was no real blueprint, well, ICU Demo Day had just 12 people in the audience, and they were just Paul's rich friends who he had tricked into coming out. Like, he literally just browbeat them, not literally, he figuratively browbeat them into coming out. And they had no clue. We pitched for like 20 minutes each, and we even had time for Q&A. It was crazy. But that was what it took, just to basically getting a bunch of rich people in a room in Boston and hoping that a few of them would consider investing in a startup. But it was so foreign back then, right? So it's changed so much now. So a lot of it is building that hype. Another one of the things a lot of founders get hung up on is trying to optimize for valuation. They get really hung up on trying to maximize the biggest, best valuation they can when they really should just be optimizing for getting the round closed. Go into Google Docs, prioritize every single one of the investors you've talked to, rank them based on their likelihood to invest. And this is all, it's not exact science, but knock out the ones who are most likely to actually sign a check and get you money, because that is the proof that's going to unfortunately make most other investors also fall in line, because we are dumb herd animals. And that's the momentum you want to build. And the easiest way to build it is to close the ones who will get you money first and start pushing it forward. Because fundraising is such a waste of a founder's time. You want to spend as little of your time as possible doing it. And what's the difference if you over-optimize for valuation? We've seen companies who just don't end up getting a round closed, or end up doing it and coming back to everyone saying, all right, listen, we're going to raise X. We ended up we're now just going to raise X minus Y, and it's fine because it's some excuse. Like, just get it done. Do it with momentum, and then get back to doing the work. Yes.
Yeah, Matt.
Hello.
So, if you could extrapolate from the 8 years of your experience, from the 80 companies you've invested in, I'm sure you have friends who started a business. You've been around it all. You've seen a lot. If you could extrapolate from all of them a bit of information, one piece of information that makes them successful, who's successful, why are they successful?
So this is the secret to startup success. 42. What is the secret? Unfortunately, a lot of this is going to sound like startup cliches at this point. It's founders who are relentless. It's founders who are able to, no matter what, obsessively focus, especially in those early days of either writing code or getting users, to the point where they just, it's just a relentless pursuit. It's the kind of thing where, and it's still kind of early, right? I don't have the best data on this even after 8 years, but the sense that I get is the founding teams set so much of the precedent for the company. It's everything from the culture to the work attitude, to the obsession or lack thereof with customer service or user experience or design. A lot happens in those first couple of years. And the ones that seem to do well longer term are the ones that, at office hours, come at you with a current set of problems. And they're the ones who, during office hours, in 20 minutes, maybe an hour, are able to generate a bunch of other ones, listen to feedback from advisors, but then also be willing to discard a bunch of it. Like one of the best lessons you're gonna learn is what advice from smart founders or smart advisors to ignore, because you're gonna ignore most of it. Like, because in most cases they're actually wrong. Right? So we don't know what we're doing. Like, no matter what your industry is, I don't care what it is, whatever stuff you're working on, I guarantee you all know about it better than I do, or better than any other person who's standing here holding a microphone, because you're obsessed over it. So it's a matter of discarding that information, but then still coming back a week or 2 weeks later for the next office hours, and being able to say, all right, so last week, 2 weeks ago, we tried figuring out X, Y, Z. We figured out X words, Y, Z, they weren't working. And we also, in the process, came up with 3 more things because we knew X worked, and so we thought, all right, let's test this thesis with this, that, and the other. And it's the ability to, again, be so relentless about adapting and just being egoless when it comes to deciding where the product is going. Because until you figure out the money machine, until you figured out like insert funding, get more money, or like insert money, get more money. Once you get that equation figured out, then you're in a different place with your company. You've sort of figured out the business. But I mean, generally speaking, until you raise that Series A, you're probably figuring out how to build that money machine, and that's when you can go raise that Series A. But like that relentless focus, and then, oh man, the other one would be founders who are able to really care. That's a crappy. You can just tell the founders who are willing to do those things that don't scale early on, who are willing to do stuff that just needs to get done, and will do it. And we'll do the crazy things that these days actually benefit you a ton, right? Like, sending 100 of our first hipmunk users little care packages that we stuffed on a Friday night while I should have been spending time with my girlfriend is amazing now, because people tweet that, people pin it, people, whatever social media platform you want to use it, right? And those little gestures have multiplier effects, and those first users are so valuable because they're the ones willing to try out a weird new product with a weird name. Like anyone who's willing to be one of your first 1,000, I guess is the cliche, those people are amazing. And figure out why the hell they're willing to do that, and delight them at every opportunity. That doesn't mean do every feature they request, but find ways to delight them and figure out why they love what they love. Because I've never been one of those first 1,000 users. I don't know who those people are, but they're amazing creatures. All right, that's a wrap. Oh, all right.
So I scud read through
Yay!
the first half of the book and got up to a night. And you talk about the alien. You talk about the Reddit alien.
Mm-hmm.
So what has been? You're really happy that it's on the upper left. Right?
Yeah, well, Paul, really, this is another good example. Smart people have terrible advice, like Paul Graham telling me to get rid of the Reddit bug and hide it in the corner because it looks ridiculous.
So, like, what impact? Why are you so happy that it's up there? Like, has that? I think we're all kind of like logo fascinated, right? It's like stereotypical for founders. So, like, what impact did that have, you think, over this many years? Did it actually have some sort of impact? Did it affect the personality of the user base you're attracting? Like, what did it have any impact at all?
I am, for better or for worse, known as the guy who just draws cute mascots for all of his companies. And I always joke about it, because like Reddit, Red Pig, Hipmunk, they all got cute mascots. I always stress that like a great brand will not save a mediocre product. Look at pets.com. Right? That's actually I love that sock puppet, but not a great company. Do not over optimize for something like branding early on. You need to make something people want, make a product that's great, and that's gonna win people over. However, you can make something people want, a great product, a great service, and then also give it a really iconic, memorable brand. I really do believe, and I don't have a ton of data to support this, I got a lot of anecdotal evidence, but that, because of however it is we remember, some part of iconic memory that lets us attach the good feelings we feel about this site or this app or this thing to some kind of an icon or image, makes it stronger, makes it a little stickier. And I mean, I've seen about a half dozen Reddit alien tattoos at this point, which is interesting, and pretty awesome. But the thing for me has always been, no matter how beautiful the devices are that we're using, they're still robots, right? Like they're still laptops, they're still cold, they're still not very human. And so the best encounters that we see, the ones that get tweeted about, the ones we get feedback emails about, the things that people write about, are the ones that remind people, users, that there are humans behind the scenes here. And so, I must have done like 400 Reddit alien logo doodles, just like Google, except for no reason. I just wake up in the morning, do a new doodle, and tell a story in these little pixels. And we'd have people who just would come back to see what was new. We'd have people who became so attached. In the example of hipmunk, we had fan art within 24 hours from people who were just drawing their own versions of the hipmunk chipmunk, and we sued every one of them. So much additional revenue. With hipmunk, the thinking was, this was a service that is only useful when you need it. I can show you Reddit today and show you, ask you what your favorite sport is and subscribe to the subreddit, and it's useful for you right now. But if I tell you about hipmunk, it's not really useful unless you're booking a flight or hotel anytime soon. And so it's even more important that we're the thing you recall when you need us. And I hope, and at least based on, so I have a little bit of data, a lot of our Google Analytics search traffic for hipmunk would be, the Google searches would be travel squirrel, which is like close enough, People at least remember there's some kind of road there and it's involved in travel. And so it's, again, I wish I had better data on this, and it's not just because you get to make someone in a mascot costume, because you get to actually make these great mascots and have people walking around in chipmunk costumes. We did that for South by a couple weeks ago. It was amazing. People want to take photos with these random Disney-looking mascot characters. The value, though, just comes from having something that people can feel a relationship to, even if obviously they don't feel like they know the chipmunk or they know the alien. It's just another extension of the brand that people, it's acceptable to kind of feel attached to make fan art to. You can't really reasonably make fan art to a Nike swoosh, but it is still able to be distilled down into an iconic piece of branding too. So that's not, I don't want to go so far with mascot land, but branding second, product first, and I think it's been helpful, but I don't have a ton of evidence to support it. Yeah.
Can you talk about the decision not to develop mobile apps?
Oh yeah.
Who wants you to? Why haven't you? And will you?
Okay. Well, why hasn't Reddit developed mobile apps? We launched iReddit. So we had an iOS app, and we built a good app. It was not a great app, and it kind of languished after I left. So I left Reddit in 2010 to go volunteer in Armenia, in the motherland for Kiva. And after I left, that was one of a handful of projects that I led that kind of languished. Reddit went through some tough years where it was just like very slim on funding and staff. And then now that the ship has been righted, the focus is hopefully, and I'm on the board now, the focus is hopefully going to be on building a better API, building better documentation for it, and letting developers just build amazing stuff. We had a great discussion with Alien Blue, which is, you guys should all use it. I'd argue it's a better experience than actually using Reddit in the browser, because they do such a better job of making subreddits obvious. That's the whole functionality of their site. They don't do a very good job of that on the web browser. So short term, there are no plans. Long term, we want to build just an even better platform for other people to build on. But the reality is, more and more traffic is going mobile. A lot of it goes to our mobile browser site, but a lot of it is coming through apps. And so there are no plans immediately to change that. I don't think we will ever pull a Twitter in terms of how we treat developers, but I'm saying that now. But Yishan has been pretty clear, as our CEO now, he's been really clear that he wants to support this kind of from an API standpoint instead of from building it ourselves. But look, flip the script. What was the first thing? I think 6 months after we launched Hipmunk, we launched an iOS app, and another 3 months after that, we launched an Android app. So perhaps you could argue that we learned a lesson there. It's fascinating to me because I still barely understand the world of app development. It is a marvel to me because, right, like in a browser, you can own, there are different ways to sort of own a user experience and like own a connection and that, like whether someone bookmarks it, someone hits Google every day to search for it, someone has it as their home page. On an app, unless you're on someone's home screen, you're pretty much irrelevant. And it's just amazing to me what, like, you're fighting for it's such a competitive landscape, right? I don't know how many icons it is, 16 icons on 4x4, however many it is. It is an amazing thing to me. because it's such a competitive space, and you have to be building something really amazing to be worthy of being on someone's home screen. Did I answer all the mobile-related questions? Okay. I'm not avoiding you. I'm just making sure to pick other people.
So in the early days of Reddit, like when you guys had something like 1,000-something users, what was your method to figure out how to build something that people want? Did you post on Reddit?
So for the first 2 weeks of Reddit, Steve and I just submitted links. We didn't have comments yet, but we just submitted links ourselves using different usernames. And because we wanted to give the impression to a new user, like, this is how the site works. It's not just Alexis and Steve post links. It's like Alexis and Steve and Fluffy Bunny 26 post links and they get voted on. And we kind of operated like that for I guess it's a couple weeks. We emailed our friends. We didn't have a lot of, there's no social media, right? It didn't even exist. So getting users was a little dicey. So we had 2 of our friends from college actually use the site, which is great. Connor and Morgan, they're amazing people. They used it. And then PG gave us a shout out in a blog, and that gave us a few thousand users. And that was enough to get us to start thinking, okay, what's next? And one of the, say that probably a month later, we added commenting. And that was going to doom the site. I remember the announcement for comments was everyone just saying, it's doomed, it's ruined. But a lot of what guided it was through feedback emails and through just user behavior. So like we knew early on how important a leaderboard was. So remember, again, you have to remember, this is 2005, okay? So the peers, obviously Dig had launched maybe 6 months before us. There was Delicious, which is a very different site. Social book marketing is just functionally very different, but there wasn't a ton of other stuff in this space. Facebook was still in colleges. And a leaderboard was gonna be the most important way for us to get those early users in that one subreddit to submit links, because it was a way for them to feel good about submitting good content and sort of make them feel bad for submitting spam. And having a leaderboard with just the top 5 users of the day, of the week, and all time ended up being a key driver for people to take their valuable time. Again, this is 2005, so asking someone to spend their day finding interesting links and submitting it to a random website was kind of crazy. And it turned out that was a huge driver for getting people on, because we would know, the site was written in Lisp back then, and so it would go down very often. I don't know if that was related or anything, but the site went down a lot. And we would know as soon as the stats or any part of the site went down that was in any way powering that leaderboard, because people would frantically be emailing us. Those power users, that like 1% of our traffic that did all the submitting, would frantically email us saying that their score hadn't updated in the last hour. We could see that they were, and obviously traffic indicated that as well, the small percentage of users that was driving the 1% rule on the internet, where 1% of the traffic generally creates all of the content for user-generated websites. It was so true. And that was a way early on to really galvanize and motivate them. But when it came to features, frankly, we made some dumb decisions until we finally got it right with, I'd say maybe like a month or 2 in, we finally decided to go all in with user-created subreddits. We didn't open up the technology for anyone to do it quite yet, because we only had a few thousand users. Joel Spolsky was the guy who first said, hey, can you make me a subreddit, joel.reddit.com? We were like, sure, it'll take 2 seconds, And then on the back end, the admin side, we had these tools for another 1.5 years, but the site wasn't quite large enough to support it, because there just weren't enough people who were willing to be like moderators in an entire new community about it. Joel was willing to do it for his, but that was a process. There were a number of features like the save button. God, that was so stupid. That was because we thought, oh hey, people want to save that link to read it a little bit later, so they'll just flag it as saved, and they can find it in the save section of their profile. It was used by like 1/100% of the user base, and I wish that thing never fucking existed. But if we had known better, we would have deleted it. We would have killed it within 6 months. But hindsight. Too close to the speakers. All right. Yes.
How did you create the culture that Reddit has? Did you do anything to guide it, or did it just happen?
At this point, there are 5,000 active subreddits. I was on one 2 nights ago. That is, so it's Our Mexico, And all the discussions are obviously about Mexican politics and society, and it's all in Spanish. I have no fucking clue what they're talking about. But the memes of our Mexico are amazing because it's like all these advice animals for things that I would never recognize because I'm not a part of that culture. There are thousands of them now. The original, I think the best thing we did was we showed both in the user experience, even though the site wasn't the prettiest, we never had McMuffins over the landing page. I love it. The day Dig put a McMuffin ad over the top half of their above the fold site, I knew it was like, yes, we are winning. Because they clearly just did not care. Like McMuffin on the top of the half of the front page, sure. Like we never wanted to put advertising that far above the user experience. And we also knew we needed to show that we cared because people were willing to put obscene hours into finding great content from all over the internet, into building this community. So I'm talking like, I hand stuffed every single t-shirt we sent out for like the first 5 years and like signed every note. We would go above and beyond for users for just the most random stuff, just because we knew that we needed to be as good, we needed to be as accommodating as possible, both in the UX of the site, but also just in trying to encourage people to do everything we were sort of expecting them to do for free. Like we had to be the best party host we could, because otherwise, why is someone going to go create Arm Mexico and then why are like 5 random people going to moderate it? Like it's the difficulty. It's sort of like creating a WordPress blog or a Tumblr blog, except a majority of the work is not just done creating content; it's done like sort of curating and dealing with a bunch of spam and just doing a bunch of just moderation tools that are not that fun. And so we needed to make people feel as excited as possible. And so the way to do that was to treat them as well as we could.
What was your defining moment, that point where you realized you had the traction to explode?
Oh man, so here's what's wild. So we look back on this, Reddit has doubled every year, almost like a month in traffic. But it never felt like that hockey stick. It never actually, I think the best moment of validation was maybe a few months in. No, that was like a month in, when we actually had enough people just using the site that like it worked. I mean, like Steve and I could just show up in the morning and there was a bunch of news and it was just working. That was encouraging, especially because again, we just graduated from college. Like this was the first major web application either of us had ever built. Steve wrote one for his senior thesis, but it was used by 2 people, right? And so just to have that was great. I think with Hipmunk, it almost seemed, I think once we launched and we saw the response, and it's mostly a UX play. Like, we're getting the same data everyone else is. We're just not showing you 30 pages of flights no human would want to take, kayak. And instead, we're putting it all on one page. We're not throwing a bunch of crap in your face and popovers and unders and all that. It's just here are the results, go and do something else. Once we saw that response, that was actually almost immediate validation, at least for the idea. Business model has been interesting because it turns out hotels are where all the money is in travel because the margins are so much better. That's why you look at hotels tonight, it's like, I know why you guys are doing so well. Focusing on the one part of travel which has great margins and you're making a great product. It should be interesting to note that we have added a Hotels Tonight feature to the Hipmunk app. But that's the kind of thing that we're figuring out, unfortunately. I mean, the biggest lesson Steve learned from Reddit was building something with an immediate business model from the very start. We actually, I know it seems so novel, right? Starting a business with a business model from the start. But there are so many, for every Snapchat, for every front back, for every Instagram, whatever the thing is in the moment, there are hundreds, thousands of others that we'll never hear from because they'll never get traction and they'll just quietly fade away. And as an investor, I can assure, I'd say, I'm making this number up, but a solid majority, well more than half of the startups that excite me now that I invested are the ones that have business models. Shocker again, right? It was a different time in 2005. Eyeballs. No, I don't think we ever said that. Maybe.
Kind of along the same subject. So you saw the Big McMuffin on Dig, and you were like, yes, we won. Well, I'm sure you had a lot of investors, or at least a group of investors who were like, guys, we're getting traffic, let's start monetizing it now. And how did you push back on that, or how did you convince them that the culture was more important?
Here's what's crazy. So Reddit, we got 12 grand from Combinator, which back then was pretty standard. It was about 6,000 per founder. And we raised a whopping $70,000 for our seed round. And we were thrilled. Again, this was 2005. We were kind of dumb, okay? We were just excited because we didn't need to pay ourselves a salary. Like Steve and I just wanted to live. We looked at that and we're like, we could live for another year and a half on this. This is amazing. And so we only had one investor. So that, anyways, this is a really random, that's an edge case scenario. But the argument that I have seen plenty of people make successfully, look at what David Karp's been able to do with Tumblr. I mean, you could argue that the Yahoo acquisition was definitely great timing for the sake of Tumblr and its investors. And then there's a case to be made for that. But I think a strong founder who's willing to say, listen, user experience really matters, especially when you're creating platforms where you're expecting users to create content. That let's find ways to be more creative than just ads, right? It's, even today, Reddit now, we're making a big push towards Reddit Gold. We would love to have a way to make Reddit profitable. It's on its way. That did not involve advertising, simply because we're using the same model for advertising online that we used for newspapers like 100 years ago. It seems like for all of the other innovations we've had, why are we still using a model where it's like content here, big ad here, content like there? It would be so exciting if Reddit Gold works out as this $3.99 a month sort of currency that exists within Reddit, this sponsorship membership sort of program. If that actually works out, it's a way to show, like, look, you really can do this. You can have a top 50 website that's not that is profitable, not from a conventional advertising model. I don't know if we'll do it, but I think a strong enough founder can make the case just on user experience alone. Especially like if you've got growth numbers that are like up and to the right, you can do a lot. I think it's when traffic starts to wane, and I think and I don't know what happened inside of Dig, but they did raise a ton of money, and they went from being TechCrunch, actually, to their credit, did write about this, like the most oft-used word in TechCrunch articles for like 3 years. They did a whole little breakdown analysis to being kind of eclipsed by Twitter and other social media platforms. And I bet by a later stage, those investors were like, whoa, hold on, dude. You promised me like thumbs up, billion-dollar company, and what's going on? And I don't know what happened in there, but I'm sure there were people inside that company or investors who said, you got to figure this out. You're not the cool kid anymore with your startup. Like, make some money or you're going to have a lot of trouble with the next round of financing. But I don't know. I'm just speculating now.
Speaking of monetizing content without ads, that's actually kind of what my startup is doing. So now I wonder.
What's your startup called?
Market Vibe.
Market Vibe.
As an investor, what's the best way to pitch you?
Nice. Okay. So my favorite tidbit that's been floating around, it's not mine, but I love sharing it, is if you go to someone you know as an investor and you ask them for investment, you're going to get advice. And if you ask them for advice, you're more likely to get investment. Now that's just a cute little saying, but the thinking behind it is an interesting psychology, right? Because it's like, you show up as a founder, you don't have a ton of leverage. Hopefully you have a little bit of leverage because your startup's doing well, it's got traction. But if you go and lower their barriers or sort of lower their defenses by saying, hey, I'm here for advice, you're a little bit more likely to perhaps get in there and actually get the check. If you go in asking for the check, the barrier is going to be up and they put on their investor hat and their monocle and they're like, well, let's see here. What kind of business do you have? So all that's to say, I don't know. I mean, the answer for me is the answer for just about everyone, which is, we want to invest in founders we believe are going to take over the world, going after a big market, and have a product that has traction. Revenue, users, ideally both. And that's the secret of it. But we can mingle afterward.
My fiance is throwing up and I have to go
help him. I'm sorry.
I have to leave.
Well, good. I mean, you're going above and beyond. Wait, he's throwing up right now and you're like, can't go. Be well. Yeah, that's stuff going on here. Oh, that's awesome. You should, if we're going to do, after UT Austin, we're going to probably, I hear people like drinking in Austin. We're going to go to some kind of establishment afterwards. So you can make it a late night, you should come out to that. And if not, tweet at me. And we can at least do this remotely. I'm flying out to New Orleans tomorrow morning for Halloween, but
Awesome.
Bring it on. And give him my best. I hope he's feeling better. That's just, wow. Okay. Yes.
So shifting gears a little bit, the book. What made you decide to write it, and how was the experience writing it versus doing startups?
The reason, so the book thing was weird. I gave a TED talk about a whale named Mr. Splashy Pants 5 years ago, and afterwards, a bunch of editors emailed, no, they Facebook messaged me and said, hey, you should write a book about this whale. And I was like, that's crazy, but okay, thank you, that's very nice of you, and kind of put it off. And then somehow talked to some people who had written books, and somehow got an agent, and the agent was talking to me, they're like, yeah, we're gonna do something. I was like, I don't know. Then hipmunk happened, so I was like, I'll put this off. Then SOPA PIPA happened, and I was done at hipmunk, went all in Washington, and made that my life for another few months. And fortunately that worked out. Yay, internet, good job everyone. We put up a billboard actually here in Austin outside of Lamar Smith's offices that said, we crowdfunded, of course, it said, don't mess with the internet, in a nice, wonderful Texas aesthetic. And yeah, take it to Lamar Smith. We also put one outside his office in San Antonio too. It was a nice little troll after the fact. The point is, during that was when I finally was like, you know what, I gotta do this now, because initially my editor was like, you should make this the Reddit story and blah 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 blah. And I was like, I don't really want to I'm gonna do that as a hook because people want to hear about starting that and insights and whatnot. But I would like to get into as many heads as possible how important the internet is to so many people, not just business, not just job creators, although that's ultimately something that moves most of our politicians, but just citizens all over America. And so it's my propaganda vehicle, hopefully, for a bunch of people, and I'm not saying you guys all have it figured out, right? But a bunch of people in the mainstream to understand this internet thing, it's not just in Silicon Valley, and it's affecting every one of us. And if we get it right, if we don't screw it up, it could mean tremendous economic potential, tremendous just societal potential, but we could F it up. So that was what finally convinced me, you know what, I gotta write this book. And then I was like, hey, this is a great excuse to buy a t-shirt cannon and rent a bus for 5 minutes. Oh, we do have a t-shirt cannon, it's not here unfortunately, I'm sorry. If you've never seen college students react to a t-shirt cannon, you would think that you were shooting money out of it, but it is just a t-shirt, and yet they are ecstatic. It's amazing. They, and the response has been great. And so the process of writing the book sucked. It was bad. I was sneaking out an hour a day trying to write a little bit. It just never came. And then finally, I took a week off, rented a place on, actually it wasn't Airbnb, it was VRB, I saw Airbnb. Rented a place, brought my friends out for a weekend, and we just got drunk and high and had a wonderful time. And then I spent the rest of the week just with my cat and writing. And I must have written 2/3 of the book during that. And that was great, because then it was just full screen. If you guys ever have to write anything, my best advice to you is turn off the internet, shocker. Full screen, literally full screen mode. It seems like a subtle thing, but psychologically it made a huge difference for me. And then just be willing to get up from the computer and not tab into Twitter or Reddit or whatever. Just get up from the computer, go play with your cat, go make a sandwich, do some jumping jacks. Accept the fact that it's not happening right now, and just get up, figure it out, and then get back to that place. And at your leisure. You really have to devote yourself to it, especially if you're not, I'm not a professional writer, right? But I hope you guys all do some form of writing, some bit of knowledge that you have learned over this period of time, because I want this shit to be shared. That's what's been so great. I talked about how dumb we were in 2005. People are, to some extent, just as dumb now. We just have, and what I mean by that is inexperienced, right? You're just out of college, but the resources are so much better. Because Fred Wilson's been publishing for all these years, because so many videos from so many brilliant people, whether it's a core thread or a random hacker news post, there's so much more knowledge out there to benefit from that just didn't exist 5 years ago, or 9 years ago, or 8 years ago. It's amazing, and I'm jealous of you. Yes?
So you mentioned that at hipmunk you had to solve we are the thing that you need when you need us problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard you say kind of 2 ways you solve that problem. One through branding and another one through UX.
Yeah.
Are there any other ways that you solve that problem?
Yeah. So we have they're called growth hackers now, right? That's the thing. An amazing woman, Julie, runs a lot of the sort of some of it's paid, some of it's not, just clever approaches to doing that kind of growth hacking in terms of figuring out, if we put $1 in, we're going to get $1.50 out, so let's do it. She actually has a really good General Assembly talk, which I think is free to watch online. You can Google for it. The other things we've learned, God, and it's a gift and a curse, okay? So email. Reddit has, I think, 5 billion page views a month, but we've never sent an email to someone ever. Just because in 05, it felt like it was kind of a dick move to be like, welcome to this thing, here's an email, here's another email, congratulations, you just got 10 upvotes, email. I don't know if it was Groupon, it's probably Facebook, Twitter, all these platforms made it so comfortable to now, like, email the hell out of people that, it's changed a lot. And, one of the ways we now use it at hipmunk is through fair alerts and through ways where people, again, always opting in, no big moves or anything, but like opting into data that people want to know. So they run a search, they're flying from, they're just checking out prices from New York City to Orlando. And, we offer them the opportunity to opt into some fair alerts because, hey, maybe they're not ready to book that one trip a year. That's just it, right? We've got business travelers pretty much on lock. If they're tech-aware business travelers, they're hipmunks. If they're young, and techie, they're hipmunks. But if they're the majority of Americans, and I'm generalizing here, obviously it's global, but the majority of Americans who take like one trip a year and they go on that one family vacation, like that's what we need to capture if we really want to be the next kayak or the next whatever. And it's a matter of being there in their heads when they need us. And so fair alerts are one way to do that. And then of course, just generating content. What is it? Inbound marketing, I guess, is the thing. Right, just making great content. We want, this goes into branding a little bit, but it's just knowing that people come to us, or we aspire for people to come to us when they're just thinking about that trip to Austin and they want to see our Austin city guide, and they know that they can trust this brand and give them good advice that's relevant to their interests. If they're going for a romantic endeavor, they're going for business, or they're going for what have you, we can be there. So it's a quadruple threat. There's a lot of different things we throw at it, and it's a challenge. But what's so rewarding is you actually get to see, you can actually do the math to figure out the time and energy, sort of cost benefit that you put into acquiring a user, and then how much you will presumably make from him or her based on what they're buying. And that's just nice because you can at least take an analytical approach to it, which is another advantage to actually having something that people can pay money for. Sure. Yes.
How did you, one of the things that blows me away every time I get on Reddit is users' appearance to Reddit. How did you make that such a deeply ingrained part of the user base and the culture on Reddit?
I don't know. I mean, the phrase was a joke that I came up with in the office along with Redditor, just because I was like, everyone's an editor and they use Reddit, so we'll call them Redditors. And then we needed an etiquette guide, and we were just like, we'll call it Reddicate, and we'll make it a wiki, and people can do whatever they want with it. It's interesting in that it is, like a lot of things, sort of evoked pretty often. I wouldn't say that it's all, it's, at some point though, here's the thing. Reddicate existed in a world before we had user-created subreddits at scale, where there really was just one subreddit. And in a lot of ways, what has happened now is like, every day, like I said, there are over 5,000 active communities on Reddit now. So like our Rainbow community, the Rainbow community on Reddit has its own sort of Reddicate. The Brony community on Reddit, or like the My Little Pony community on Reddit, has its own Reddicate. Like now it's at a point where it's so distributed that each one of these communities that exist, all 5,000 plus of them, each have their own sort of standards and guidelines. And this stuff, I can't even begin to understand how it just kind of self-organizes. We had one, and then we opened up the platform, and now there's thousands. All right.
When subreddits started gaining some popularity, was it scary giving like admin control of some sort to just people you didn't know, or could be the case?
It was, the way we've always thought about subreddits is that it's like a Tumblr blog. It's like a WordPress blog in the WordPress network. The reality was, if we're gonna have someone, like if we can have our own Humans of New York, and I'm a huge fan of Brandon, and his book is out, by the way, doing very well. Someone who is able to just like create this thing that changes the world and is this amazing stuff, we have to be willing to be like, yeah, go ahead, start. The wild thing has been, it's like, it really wasn't that, I don't know, there wasn't there wasn't that much hesitation because at the end of the day we knew like, yeah, you know what, you can, whether it's allowing someone to create a Twitter account or allowing someone to create a Tumblr blog, like this is just how social media works. So there wasn't a ton of hesitation.
So if it went rogue, like it was just contained, right? Like,
yeah, I mean it's like having a crazy Twitter account or a crazy Tumblr account or a crazy WordPress account. One of the things we don't do a good enough job of now is, and this is why I said Alien Blue is a better experience than the Reddit front page, is there are still a significant number of users who don't understand how Reddit works, like who don't understand Reddit is just like Twitter, just like Tumblr, where you subscribe to subreddits you like, just like you subscribe to Twitter accounts you like, or subscribe to Tumblr accounts you like. And so I know there are people who hit the front page and who are like, no, you know what, I'm really into makeup, fashion, and the Brooklyn Nets. And it's like, hold on. These all exist. These are all thriving, amazing subreddits. We haven't made it as obvious to onboard you. And it's like, we could go the Twitter, Tumblr route and just make a blank front page and just say like, welcome, create an account. And once we do, we'll onboard you and say, what do you want, suggested people to follow, suggested subreddits to follow. I think we've just been hesitant because the way it started was we had to have a front page when it was just that one subreddit because we needed people to, again, it was 2005, like we needed people to understand like this is how this thing works. If we had cloistered it off, we would have had every one of 90% of the users who would have hit the front page would have been like, the fuck is this? I don't want to create an account, like whatever, I'm out. And so that is the thing we consistently fight. But like I said, Alien Blue is on such a good course because it does such a good job raising that awareness in users.
Yeah. Where'd you start with hipmunk? Did you start with, hey, the current sites that are out there aren't good and this experience is terrible? Did you start with the design? Did you start with the back end? Like, how did you bring it all together?
So I just got back from Armenia, and Steve he'd been playing video games for a little while, and he was like, you know what, I'm ready to go back. I was like, okay, cool, good luck. And a friend of ours, Adam, who was just finishing MIT, had been traveling a ton. He booked all the flights for the debate team, and he hated how Kayak so almost deliberately obfuscated the good flights, just to encourage people to sort of click through more. Like you would have flights be ranked higher than others that no human would want to take. Or you have code shares that were the exact same flight but just had different codes. But it's like, why do I need to see this twice? And he just was pissed off. And he was, as a developer, he started building his own solution. And he talked Steve into it, and it was great. It was so anticlimactic. He messaged Steve and he was like, hey, I really want to make a travel search website. And Steve was just like, this is a stupid idea. Like, travel search is awful. The industry is bad. Like, he expected to quit and just come up with something new a few months later once it was clear, not quit on the company, but quit on the idea and just come up with something new later. And when I flew out about a week or two before demo day. And the version that I first saw it maybe like a month before demo day. And the version that I saw was not at all visual. And they were working on some kind of an algorithm called suckage that would like rank different flights better. You know, if it's $10, yeah, if it's $10 more, why not just take the direct instead of the one-way kind of thing? Or if it's depending on the routes or a red eye, or whatnot. But it's still it looked just like every other travel site. And I remember Steve showing me, and I was like, yeah, suckage is cute, but I don't know, it doesn't seem that interesting. And then 2 weeks before the launch, I went back out and they had just finished the user interface, the GUI with all the dragging and the sliding and all the Gantt charts. And I had my Keanu Reeves moment where I was just, wow. You know, because then, okay, now all this shit's on one page. You're hiding all the flights no human would want to take. You're hiding all the duplicates. Like, this actually feels amazing. And you just have to call it agony instead of suckage because suckage is not gonna fly. But that was the moment when it was clear, like, all right, they're onto something, and this is great. And that was when I joined. But it all started from scratching an itch that Adam had. In an industry, in 10, we had a lot of angels who came to us and just said, we really love you guys. Obviously, the team, you guys are sound, cute mascot, good idea, you got traction, but travel is just scary. I don't want to deal with it because the incumbents suck, they're lazy, everyone you're working with is perpetually out of business, like airlines basically. So don't do it. And what's been so nice though is it's been a validation for the industry. And so, in the last 3 years, there have been some amazing travel products that have started launching and are doing really great stuff. And so it's encouraging because you might have to be the first. If you've got a problem that you just hate so much, that's a good place to start. Even though no one else seems to be doing it, why not? Does that follow?
Yeah,
Okay.
if somebody will let it.
Sure. I'll let it slide.
Yeah, and so it sort of worked for a while, but the visual wasn't great. And then at what point did the visual and the experience, the data come together? Right, it was a better way to handle. I'm a hipmunk user, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
I've been recommending it for years.
Well, I mean, this was like literally a week or two before launch. They were just like, you know what, this isn't great yet. This doesn't feel different. And then the user interface happens. And then, you know, we only had flights back then, we didn't have hotels. But at that point, it was just, all right, like this looks different. This makes people go, like, whoa, when they see it for the first time. I mean, maybe they have a laugh about agony search, but this actually just felt different. And so that's when, you know, once the UX, once the site itself felt special, and that's such a subjective thing, because we hadn't launched it yet, we showed it to friends and family and whatnot, but it just kind of felt different, felt unique.
Now, was that one of the founders, the visual?
That was, well, so Adam had definitely been inspired by it's the Matrix view, ITA Matrix. You couldn't actually book flights through it, but like elite travelers would use it to scan flights because it used the Gantt chart method, which I remembered from train schedules in Europe. And so this is obviously like we're all standing on the shoulders of giants. Like hipmunk did not invent the Gantt chart, but applying it to flights like we did, you know, throwing in amusing things like agony sorts, and then also just allowing people to just effortlessly drag shit around, whether it was when they wanted to take off, land, all that stuff. That total package of execution just ended up being something people really liked. And I mean, that's credit to Adam and Steve. And it's funny too, everyone always still gives Steve shit, you know. Again, Reddit's not the best designed website, but the guy who built Reddit is the same guy who built hipmunk, which now gets all this praise for being so amazingly designed. Like, same dude. It's just, you know, 5 years later, you get a little bit more experience and you suck a little bit less at web design.
So you touched on it a couple of times about the pain of working with incumbents, particularly with hipmunk. Can you talk a little bit about strategies used for that?
Yeah, oh man. Okay, so the best strategies, whether it was dig or whether it was kayak, was just ignore. Just ignore. Just do not pay attention to your competition. I remember they launched, or we launched, and 2 weeks later I actually learned about dig, and I emailed I emailed Steve and Paul. And I found the email. It's in the book, I found it. And it just said, meet the enemy, dig.com. And Paul was like, chill out. Like, they're not going to beat you. Your competition is never going to beat you, no matter what. They're incumbents. They have other things they're focused on, and they're going to defeat themselves before they defeat you. And in truth, I mean, we've had hundreds of YC companies since that first batch, and only one's actually been defeated by an incumbent. So when it comes to the ones that are your competition, like people would ask us, "Oh, you guys worried about Google and travel search?" And it's like, no, because Google's a fucking advertising company for search. Like they're doing a great job for, you know, letting people plug in keywords to sell whatever mesothelioma legal work. But they don't. I mean, they're brilliant people with near infinite resources, but they don't care about solving this problem as much as we do. And so that should never be a concern. When it comes to working with incumbents like airlines or hotels, who are the best hack was one that Adam employed, because for 3 months during YC, we needed to sign someone so that we could have sort of basically flight data instead of just scraping. Like we wanted to actually have a deal signed to show like we would be able to do business with an airline or an online travel agency. Ideally, we ended up going with Orbitz, but the way that happened was Adam just kept scheduling flights. He just found excuses to be in Chicago or the other cities where these companies were headquartered. And he kept working his way up the kind of food chain until he got to a decision maker. But he did it all using phone and email. And now Adam, I mean, he's a smart dude, so he didn't sound like a sort of, I don't want to say stereotypical 20-something. He didn't sound like an idiot, right? He didn't sound like a kid who was inexperienced. He looked like one, but he didn't let them see him. And so for all these meetings, he got all this progress, impressed a lot of people. Look at what we built. But, you know, stereotypically, a lot of people running these things are just old white dudes who would look at our company a little skeptically, right? It already has a silly name with this weird mascot, and like, you want to do what with us? Like, we are Orbitz, we are United, we are whatever. And then as soon as he showed up, when he finally got that coffee meeting, because he would email and just be like, hey, look, I'm only in town for another hour, but if you can make it, I'm actually right near your office. I just got done with the meeting. He didn't have another meeting. I just got done with the meeting. I got some time. Let's get a cup. And when he finally got that meeting, he shows up and they're just like, whoa, you are not what we expected. But now it's a strength because they were already impressed by what he had built and what he was talking about. And then when they met him, his apparent youth was considered like, oh, this must be some booger kid. Like, great. If it had gone the other way, you know, you can't say for sure, but it'd be a lot easier to dismiss a fresh-faced 20-something with this chipmunk travel search company than it was to do it once he had actually talked to him. So this stuff is, unfortunately, it involves a lot of chocolates for receptionists and personal assistants. Seriously. It involves a lot of taking care of the people who guard these people who are unfortunately decision makers if you want to get deals done, but it can be done. And it's just like investing in the sense that you close the one you can close as soon as possible, because once we got Orbitz, we signed a good deal. It was by no means a great deal with them, but we were able to sign a deal, have that at demo day, and then start going to other airlines, start going to actual airlines. Like, they were able to aggregate, and so we could have a bunch of fare data, and we'd actually get paid every time someone bought a flight. But then we can go to United and say, hey, United, right now you're paying Orbitz this, and Orbitz is paying us that. You could just pay us more than that and still less than what you're paying Orbitz, and everyone is happy, obviously except for Orbitz. And then we can just go down the line with every single airline and start doing deals directly with them. And it takes a lot of time, a lot of biz dev work, but once you can close one, it's validation, it's social proof, it's whatever you want to call it, and the herd mentality comes right back in, and people are like, okay, you're legitimate, sounds good, let's take this meeting. And it actually starts snowballing, it actually starts getting easier until the whole thing tips over. And then you actually have airlines coming to you, and you have rental car companies coming to you saying, hey, we want to get enterprise on Hipmunk, when are you going to do car rental? And that's amazing, but it's a process. It takes a couple of years, but it starts getting that first, the lowest hanging fruit. And hopefully it's a delicious fruit, like mangoes. I love mangoes.
So how important is it where you start your startup geographically? Like, you're in a great city right now.
You're in an amazing city right now. Yeah.
What about other cities across the state?
You know, I'm a big booster. I have no connection to the prairie whatsoever. I'm just a big booster of startups everywhere. Obviously, the Valley is a special place with good burritos and no nightlife. But you know, we started Reddit in Medford, Massachusetts, which is a suburb of a suburb of a suburb of Boston. And we eventually moved into Somerville, which is just a suburb of Boston. And you know what? There was an amazing startup community there. Boston obviously still has an amazing startup community. There were times though, I mean, look, we had Dig, was the Silicon Valley company, and they got all of the press. We had literally no press. TechCrunch never wrote about Reddit once until the day we got acquired. So that's why I always tell people, like, do not start a startup with TechCrunch. Do not start a startup for anyone other than yourself and your users. And geez, when they did write about us, they would just write things like, the Dig lead is insurmountable, Reddit should just give up. Like, I love these quotes, I put them on my wall, I still have them. It's great. There are disadvantages, undoubtedly, because so much of the media, and I live in New York now, and I'm at the heart of, like, I know this firsthand. You know, part of the reason I ended up doing all the press I did for SOPA PIPA was just because I lived in Brooklyn. It was because I could get on a train and be on MSNBC, right? It's amazing how much of an impact that has, because all of the media in the United States, nearly all the media in the United States, is created in Midtown New York. Like, what does that say when the agenda for the United States of America media is created in a tiny sector of a city? Like, that has an undeniable effect. And so there are advantages to being, whether it's, you know, within the tech bubble, you know, the tech press, the tech media is all there and help you get attention, all that stuff. But the curse of it is you get caught up drinking this Kool-Aid and building things and solving problems just for people within the community. And I think that's where the great advantages are of being in, I mean, Austin, you guys are getting fiber in a week. Like, fuck you guys. I know. I'm so upset. I taken 3 trips down to KC, and the Airbnb we stayed at last week, I did not want to leave. Like, I wanted it into my veins. And KC has a burgeoning startup community. Like, we visit the startup village, and it's so cool because it's a bunch of residentials that now have the fastest internet in the country, also some of the most affordable. And they're building startups. Like, whoa. But you throw that in a place like Austin, and it's going to be crazy town. Just crazy. So I think there's still a value. I mean, I still tell people, you know, if you get accepted to YC, do it. And look, at the end of live in the valley, because after 3 months of being there, you're gonna want to get the fuck back to wherever you came from. You're gonna race back, but bring back some of that money, bring back those connections and those advisors. But it is, in just years, it has become so clear how much these communities have built up and grown. And it's not just New York, and it's places like Des Moines that were put on the map because one startup, Dwala, raised some great money from great investors like Union Square Ventures and took it right back to the community because they have assets there, they have a connection there, they have a community there that they rely on, and they're building the future of money. Like Des Moines, like why the hell not? Why the hell not? And so it is becoming less and less imperative. I don't think any startup needs to be there. There may be some weird exception where whatever you're working on, just have maybe you're making the pickaxes in the gold rush, and you know your first users for the first few years are going to all be developers doing startups. There are examples you can find, but you can visit and you can take the money. But as long as you're not living in a community that is so. I grew up in suburban Maryland, Columbia. Like I would probably not advise a startup in Columbia to stay in Columbia, Maryland. But like if you're around a strong university, you know all this stuff. Certainly in a place like Austin, you should not even think twice. I think
Indianapolis.
Indy, awesome, dude. Well, I have not visited Indy.
You need to get up there.
I gotta get up there.
Got a place just like this.
What's it called?
Well, there's a few. There's Speakeasy, Developed Town.
You had me at Speakeasy.
Yeah, there's beer on tap.
Oh, great. Okay, but that's like, and to see this change. I mean, look, different communities are at different levels at present. But the only thing you have to promise me is no more Silicon Blank. I'm trying to kill Silicon Alley, and I know Silicon News is doing its thing, and much love, and I'm like, but I am tired of like anyone living in the shadow of Silicon Valley. Like, just don't. They're doing a great job. They're doing their thing, their way. But we don't need to be a derivative, right? And it's just, no, let's build our own thing, let's find our own assets and be great at them. Don't call it Silicon Blank. Okay.
You mentioned how Polygram wrote a Reddit on his blog.
Yes.
Kind of after your first 1,000 users. What if you didn't do that?
Oh,
Aside from the $500 sticker campaign that you did, what would you have done?
If PG had not written about us in that blog entry, I think it would have been more of a slog. I mean, yeah, I spent, so the joke, but the truth is I spent about $500 advertising Reddit, period. It was just stickers. But that's more of a statement of like how much the internet helps, you know, ideas spread. We probably would have just gutted it out and kept trying to get, like, we would go to events at, you know, there's tons of universities at Boston, which is a great asset, and just going to events and talking to people and encouraging them to check out the site. I mean, this was laborious. And again, it was 2005, right? So I couldn't go on Twitter. I couldn't even go on Facebook and talk to people outside of my university. Like, there were not a lot of options. So it would have been a lot of gritty stuff. I mean, we didn't even get, the first press coverage we got was in The Guardian. The British Guardian, like 6 months after we started. It was in December. And I remember Richard Adams was the name of the reporter. You never forget your first. And Richard was like, hello, I'm from The Guardian. And I was like, oh my God, The Guardian wants to talk to us. Like, how come an American reporter has not called me sooner? Like, this hurts, but thank you. We would just, I mean, I found TypePad. TypePad, is that right? Is that the CMS? TypePad? TypePad blogs by like Joe. Would be like, hey, I checked out this site called Reddit today, and we'd jump in on the comments and be like, hey, thanks so much. This is, you know, let us know some feedback. Like, you're just Google News alerts where they were around, and just obsessing over any potential discussion about the site. But back then it was just blogs. There was no social media to speak of, so it would have been a slog. Absolutely. I mean, maybe we could have bribed someone at TechCrunch to finally write about us, but I doubt it. Maybe if I'd spent some time in the Bay Area, maybe I could have convinced someone. But I don't want to say it's almost. I don't want to say it's not something I want to think about. I mean, it's something it's more like today's world is so much different, and I saw the difference between launching Hipmunk in 10 and Reddit in 5 was just night and day. So that we don't need a random link in a Polygram essay to launch our company anymore, just because there's so many other outlets that drive way more traffic that aren't even in anyone's blog. It's just, I mean, just getting a random tweet from someone can set off more traffic if enough people see it, retweet it, all that good stuff. You're making a very subtle gesture that I think is either wrap it up or we're going to get cotton candy. Oh wait, and how long? 8 minutes. Damn, all right. Joe's hardcore. Okay. So we can do one more question. I want to sign some books for all of you wonderful people who have books, or just random. I can sign random things. But okay, yes.
For Hipmunk, when you were doing, so you did your business development, you got your deals with your airline and your hotels. about the timing for traction versus business development, and not lose the hotels or airlines that you already had. Isn't that difficult?
So we had an out. So we didn't have a hotel search yet. So it was just flight search. And our out was basically, we're spending these 3 months and going through this accelerator, and we're building this product. We can show you a prototype, it works, it's great, we're gonna get your API, we're gonna get your data, and it's gonna be wonderful, and then we're going to launch. So we did not actually have traction. We just were able to convince them, and this is most of the work of Adam and just good negotiation, that look, we've got a good track record. As founders, we've done stuff before. We built something that clearly you want enough to sign a deal with, and we're going to use this as our launch vehicle. And we're going to promote you in the process, because now we're going to make Orbits look really cool for partnering with this startup. But really, it was just a matter of saying, like, yeah, we don't have any traction, but we hope we will. And that's, Adam was also, I think, a national, if not international, debate champion. So he is a good negotiator.
Marketing online if you're trying to compete with hotels.
Wait, sorry, what was the first part of that?
At what point do you start doing the marketing? Way before, like as soon as you get the contracts, or did you?
Oh, once we got a contract signed, it was maybe, I don't know, like a few days or a week or so, and then we launched. And our launch was just, hey, we launched, and I talked to a few reporters ahead of time, and then it just happened. It was all word of mouth at first. It was just, hey, look what's happening. And it was at least 6 months before we started paying for marketing, doing advertising, that kind of thing. It was a lot of just social media hustle. If someone would land in New York, and I would have a Twitter search feed of people who were complaining about where to get Italian food, I would just chime in as the hipmunk Twitter account and just be like, oh, you got to go to supper. It's cash only, but it's amazing. It's is it the Lower East? That's Lower East Side. I was thinking of Alphabet City. Anyway, and it was just being helpful. It was a lot of just social media helpfulness. It wasn't like, hey, check out hipmunk next time you come to New York. It was, let me solve your problem, traveler, and let me just be helpful. A lot of that. Okay. All right, so now I'm told I have to go. But thank you so much. And I'm on the Twitters. If you didn't get to ask me a question, at Alexis Ohanian. And hopefully you come out to UT Austin. At least tell some Longhorns to hook them. Hook them. Is that right? I went to UVA. Wahoo wah. Yeah. We don't have sports teams, so we don't know how to do it.
Tennis and swimming.
We do amazing tennis and swimming. And lacrosse is still pretty good.
Yeah, they're like top 4.
Ball, see, all sports that I just barely understand. I can't. But thank you.